Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back with John Riggio, tennis pro, architect, man of the hour. As always, he joins us today to talk more about his career. And yeah, he has a few. Welcome back today. How are you doing?
Good. Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm great, sweetheart. I know today we're going to focus more on tennis again, and you still playing tennis. And as a tennis pro, your career. Last week we got to see some of those cool rackets you told us about, and you broke a few. But how are you feeling today? Everything good?
Yes, everything's great. Thank you. Yes, I have more rackets, and that is to continue from what I had shown you, and the rackets they're getting even better. I think just to continue off from where I was with those old wood rackets, I was able to get my old two wood rackets. These are very nice rackets. They're in good condition, and these are rackets my parents had. But one thing that's good about these, if you see here, it's a his and her set. One here with Ivan Gulagan, and here Marty Risen. And these are very nice rackets. They're both Dunlop. These are in excellent condition too. I bought these. These are old rackets. They both have candy cane strings, and you see the color is like his and hers. So this is his, this is hers, and this is the same racket. These are in excellent condition, old wood rackets. And I bought these because my parents had these rackets. We used to have a bunch of rackets like that. And so those are really good. And then I have some rackets. One interesting racket, I was looking for some pro stock rackets. And one pro stock racket was a racket that another pro player was using. And I was able to buy this racket. And this racket, I envisioned playing with this right away.
Mm-hmm.
But then I took a look at the condition, and you see it says here Bosworth Tennis.
Yeah.
And I bought it, and it said that this other player was using it and everything, and I wasn't too sure about it.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just open this here. So I had taken it out of the thing here, and this is a very nice Dunlop racket. It's a nice racket. It has leather grip. And this racket, it isn't from long ago. It's very recently, and it's used by a player, Tommy Roberto.
Mm-hmm.
And it says here it's pretty good. Has a swing of 302, and it's very nice balance on it. And this is a Dunlop racket that is a pro stock racket. It does have some wording on it saying Dunlop.
Okay.
With this kind of pro stock racket, doesn't necessarily have to have wording, because of the situation where if you're playing and you have wording, you're advertising someone's brand. They might not have, you're not really sponsoring the brand. And then so this here, and this has just the grip from this particular company. And this one is option 2C of a Dunlop Pro Stock. They have all kinds of different models of the rackets. It's a very nice one. So I think I bought this. I envisioned playing with this right away, but since I noticed this has this whole thing with this player, and I think this player is was playing recently, that I just sort of kept it in the bag, and I haven't really played with it. So I just kept it there. So let me just show the next one. Now, the next one is really just to give you an idea. I went looking for some more rackets, and I have another very nice Dunlop. And this Dunlop is the same idea. It's a pro stock and has the leather grip. And this was just made recently. It isn't from long ago. It has a smaller head size, but this is typical of what kind of racket that I would play with. And it's all the black dot. It has some things about the tension on it and the weight of it. It's officially a Dunlop racket, officially manufactured. And with this kind of racket, I used to also have another racket, and this is from the Prince Racket Company, gave me this racket. And this is a pretty good racket that I had. This is called the Prince Graphite Mid Plus.
Okay.
And this racket, they gave me two of these, and of course, if they were to break, they'd replace them. And this also has a leather grip. Now this racket is like from the year like 19 goes around from the year like 1986
Okay.
to like 1988. They were making these rackets, and I had a couple of these, and these weren't too bad. I can use this as a backup racket. If my other racket broke, I could finish the match with something like this. And
Mm-hmm.
very strange, I bought this racket, and for some reason, someone had broke it, but they broke it very different. I think this, you can see the strength of this kind of racket.
Mm-hmm.
As if you can see, this is bent. It looks like someone had maybe took the racket and hit it on the floor, because it
Yeah.
looks like it's hit on the floor over here, and the metal, which is made of composite metal, seems to have bent a little. It's bent and it's just about cracking over here. So I bought this just as far as memorabilia, but it does have a crack in it. It's very interesting, and but this is the same kind of racket. This wasn't too bad a racket for that era. It's just a Prince Graphite, and this one is just a standard racket. You would just string it, maybe up to 60 pounds, and you could play a pro match with it. It isn't too bad. So that
Nice.
is one racket that I had, and that is the usual thing I had. So I had that and the other one, this racket, which was the just like a pro stock, and it isn't really wasn't really advertising the brand. This one does have the painted Dunlop insignia on these strings, but that would usually change because that one just came with the string. So those are pretty good. So I picked up a few of those pro stock rackets
Mm-hmm.
and some memorabilia about them, and so it just brought back some memories for me, and it was very interesting. And those old wood rackets, I was able to find those two in excellent condition. But so that was good. So those are two rackets we used to have at home. I thought they were very interesting. But just to add to some tennis points, I think I was thinking about some important things, and some of them just to point out was when I was playing at Sutton East, when that was my tennis bubble, and they put in the grandstand and everything at that point, was they used to charge admission. And I think that's one point. It wasn't just when you would just walk onto the grandstand like you're anywhere. You would really have to go through and buy a ticket and enter into
Mm-hmm.
the area there and sit on the grandstand to watch it. And I think when I was playing some important matches, the whole sidewalks were filled with people. It was really amazing. I think they charged about approximately $8 per ticket for that general admission. So that was pretty good. I think it was priced as a typical general admission they would have at any stadium you'd go to. So you go there, and that was really the start of that whole thing. So that was pretty good. And I think another thing about my tennis career that I think I was pointing out, showing the old wood rackets, showing
Mm-hmm.
the metal rackets, was really my generation. I thought it was very interesting that my generation, my age when I was born, uh, the people that I was around was very interesting. That there was a lot of things happening with people maybe a little older, maybe 10 years to 14 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think going through that generation, I think there were some good things about it, and maybe there were some things that might have not been as good. I think the one thing that was good, I think, like a lot of things with the 80s, was the new rackets, the new style to play. I think that was pretty good. And I think just the time of the 80s going into 90s were pretty good for me, good for people around me. And then I noticed some things like say like my sponsors. I think the only thing like with my sponsors is that they were a few years older, and they could say communicate with my mother, at my mother's age. But as I was progressing in my career, particularly my sponsor that
Mm-hmm.
started this whole thing in Hicksville, Patrick Mulroney, he was a little older and he went into retirement. And I remember those times with playing tennis. I every once in a while I give him a phone call, and I think he was always good. You always call him about my tennis, and it was helping to keep my tennis going. But unfortunately, since he was going into retirement, some interesting things was happening. I think so that really had to propel me to find more people to sponsor my game. But I think that is one thing about my particular generation that was making things very interesting. And so I was lucky to find more help with my tennis game. But in fact, that is one interesting thing about the tennis game. And then because he was always sponsoring pro tennis players, he had his own pro shop, and he knew all the different sport brands. He knew all the Prince, Dunlop, Babolat, Wilson, all the different brands, and that were sponsoring players. And so that was one interesting thing about my generation and playing, that I was doing things, and there was like this whole thing with the different like generations of people, the years of they were playing.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that was one thing about it that I thought was very interesting. So I think I was able to find new sponsors. It was interesting, but I think it was that one point was a little difficult, but I was able to do it, and I think that's one interesting thing about my generation. And I think starting off, I think I saw a lot of the previous generations tennis players. Some of them were still playing with wood rackets too, and
Wow.
of course they had the pro version of those wood rackets. So that was very interesting. So that is one interesting thing about my generation. I was able to see the previous generation players. Some of them had old rackets or wood rackets, and the playing style was a little different. They weren't really using all the topspin on the ball. They were hitting more of a straight line ball using those teardrop shaped rackets. So things were progressing a little, changing, and I think that was what happening. And then I think also since uh, my age compared to a lot of people who are
Mm-hmm.
sponsors and things like that, when I was getting sponsored and doing these changes with different sport organizations, they already had some players that they knew from the previous generation. They already went through a lot of experiences, things like promoting the player, having getting a brand with the player, then the thing with all the things with the as far as like television and
Mm-hmm.
publications. I think when I was playing, they had a lot of publications coming through with one of the papers they had in Manhattan. And that's usually how people knew about those matches taking place with the Manhattan Open, autograph signing day, things like that, was going into those usual newspapers. The thing with the tennis magazine at the time, there was always that controversy with tennis magazine, and I think a lot of people there was always like peer pressure to try to find out how you can get in with the tennis magazine, but they were a little bit separate group, and think I had said on some shows like they didn't want the tennis magazine on the shelves at all. So then that was one thing that was interesting. So then when I was doing things with different people, and I think that even progressed all the way up to stadiums, like some people, when we were doing the thing, building the stadium, I think some of my sponsors, they had already had these experiences with previous players where they were doing the stadiums and things like that. And I think some people, they weren't sure if the stadium deal was going to um, uh, something they want to invest in. I think like with the pro, they offered the pro uh, company if they wanted to invest in continuing construction of the stadium. And I think I know from my group of people, the sponsors and everything, they certainly were going to continue building the stadium with that. But I think since I was maybe one generation younger than a lot of people, and my sponsors, or they already had a history of other players that they had sponsored. So I think in one thing they knew that I was the one to invest in. I think that's one thing that helped me. And then the second thing was also wondering if what good investments are really going to go along my career. Do they want to go with the stadium ideas? And each camp had the option to invest money into buying stadiums. And like Perot did buy a tennis center over in Glen Cove, New York, on Long Island. I think I had said this before. And it is on my list of different experiences from the tennis. If you were to go on the internet, I have it listed. And so that was more of a solid investment for them. And I think those type of ideas I had when I progressed on to where I went to Mitsubishi and then ending in Reebok. I then would then propose those same ideas to them, giving them examples of tennis centers, maybe building the rest of the stadium, things like that. So those were different things. And I think since it was my generation, they already had an idea of what things to really go with, and some things maybe they don't want to bother with. I think the tennis center idea was probably pretty good because they could always put other people in the tennis center. If my game or another player's game they're investing in were to stop, certainly they could always get some other people to walk into the tennis stadium or tennis center and always could play there. They could always rent it out too. I think during the time I was in the Sun East, I did get some experience in teaching some ordinary people some tennis too. Instead of just waiting for just those pro, they had an idea of maybe working in some just basic people who would learn some tennis from me, and maybe that could generate also eventually a personal income on the side for me too. Because with these tennis centers, there's always the idea of me possibly even just running my own personal tennis center and making money that way, generating money, teaching and things like that. So I was already doing some of that. They gave me a few people to teach tennis to who weren't pro players. So I did get a little sampling of that at the time too. So that wasn't too bad. I think some ideas going back, even Vitas Gerulaitis was always recommending, telling me to put my name in like the local penny saver where I can give tennis lessons, and as just like a little side thing. So that was one interesting thing. And I think one interesting thing about my generation that was a good thing instead of all the things that they were cautious about was the new thing with television having the video van. They had this television van, and it had the like this boom on top, and when the television was going to go on, they used to raise the boom, and you see this little television camera on it, and at any time I was on TV. And they did this on purpose with myself and with other players, that the television would turn on at any time. There's no way for me to know if I was on television for that match or I wasn't on television. And I think that is something new for my generation. I think it worked pretty good. They did that on purpose because they don't want you to become self-conscious about playing on television. And they also don't want anyone interfering too. They don't want people coming over. So this whole thing with the mobile van and the television worked out very good. In fact, I think the first time I was just made the main group, when I just turned 18 years old, they had like the Channel 2 news van came out. He parked in the parking lot and the boom went up. And I think when I was playing some tennis, my opponent, one of the games I remember particularly was with Vitas Gerulaitis. He wasn't too sure what was happening because he was a player from a previous generation, and he was used to organizing the players there, the new players in the pro group. And so that worked out really good. That was to my advantage in my generation, that they could just turn on the camera and I'm there. And this happened over the years through my career, where they were able to use that handheld camera, and it's somewhat large. I think for them, you probably see them on television. They have to put them on their shoulder if they carried them. or it just goes on a boom of a truck. So they had those, and but I think in my generation that was able to help me out. And so that was one thing I was able to excel with. Then the next thing with the television, wasn't just the television, but it was also what television network. And I think when I was at Sutton, they had Robert Kraft. I think I talked about Robert Kraft as one of the persons involved with my tennis. And I was there, and really the network to really get on at that time was ESPN. So I was really one of the first players to really get on ESPN. And I was talking to some players when I used to check back at the tennis center over by the parking lot, and they would say, they're getting jealous. They're getting jealous. They want to go on ESPN. So I was really doing the top thing, the newest thing, going on ESPN and going on other networks too. It's like I don't even know all the networks I was on, but I find out later that they have seen me in different parts of the world, and they really like my playing and they know my playing.
Yeah.
So that was really good. And so I think one thing also was I was also talking about some things about the tennis center and the people, but at the player level, I think the players that I initially met, like they had Vitas Gerulaitis, Ivan Lendl, and Bjorn Borg, I think they were all willing to let me get recognition, exposure on TV. And I think one thing was very interesting, that particularly Ivan Lendl, he was the guy running the papers and going through some basic things after I turned 18 about how to play and things like that. And I think his idea he formulated was that I would really instead of having my own court in Jericho, that they would maybe move me to where I'd have my own court at the tennis center, that did happen. Just I think his idea was for me just to play in the stadium. He was gonna let me play in the stadium and use that as my place of warming up and things like that. And so he gave me the address, and I was going down there at the time when I was just turned 18 and checking out the stadium there. But he had an idea of me going there and making that was going to be the place that he thought I should go, putting together the things. But I think that's another thing that's maybe the generational thing, where this idea of me having my own court just there outside and building around the court. Sometimes they start putting bleachers around the court, things like that, was really what was happening at that time for my generation. And I think the tennis bubble, I didn't research the tennis bubble technology back too far, but I think the tennis bubble was another thing that was maybe something newer, that it was being kept up with air pressure. And this thing with using the air pressure with the tennis bubble, and you could play when it's raining outside, if it's cold outside, you play all year long. So those are big advantages to the tennis bubble. And I think the tennis bubble is what started to take in my years. The tennis stadium idea then coming up later was a much bigger idea as far as admission of people, but it was really you couldn't use that in all times. You couldn't use it in all different kinds of weather. So there was limits transitioning over to the tennis stadium. So I think now those were some very interesting things that were taking place, was really changes in technology, also my generation, where the older people around me, a lot of the people, they already knew the older generation. I was maybe 10 years or 14 years older than me. Those were the players a lot of them already had a lot of experience with. And so I think in some ways I did get some help because of that. And in some ways they might not have, there might have been more problems, more complicated. Like my sponsor went into retirement on one of them. And so those were some interesting things that were taking place. And so I think that is one thing about the career at that time that was going on. Then another thing about my career that is interesting is when I was talking about my career, that I was saying that I had the largest contract It was in the newspapers, and it went up to 120 million eventually. But that contract, that whole entertainment contract with the stand-in and spokesman, wasn't really that common for most people. Very few people were able to get something like that. I was told I was only the fifth entertainer to really achieve that high with entertainment and the whole contract that took place. And so that is pretty good. I think that is another big thing. So there were a few people before me that had that size contract. So I think that is another thing. I don't know how many years older the other people had. I don't really know the name of any of them, but there was other people that had that size contract.
Amazing.
I might not have been in tennis. I think I was probably the first one in tennis to
And he
have
still
that.
becomes an architect. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Well, I apologize, John. We're out of time now, but another great story as always. Would you mind sharing how we can reach out to you, please?
Yeah, sure. To find out my tennis stories, you just go onto Facebook, go into John Riggio Pro Tennis Player. I have a link to a list of my experiences playing tennis, my matches, things like that. And on the Facebook page, you can see my photographs of different pictures I have there, some videos where I'm in, things like that. And of course, I'm updating it all the time. I'm adding on some information on there that's very interesting to watch.
Great. Thank you so much. Always pleasure having you here. Story after story. Love it. John, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the holiday. Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is John Riggio. I'm the CEO of John Riggio, R.A. Architect, LLC. I provide architect services in the New York City metropolitan area. That includes New York City, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. My areas are specifically Long Island, the 5 boroughs of New York City, Westchester, Yonkers. In New Jersey, it is North Jersey, Central Jersey, and South Jersey. In Philadelphia, the areas are the Philadelphia metropolitan area. You can find out more information about my company at www.johnriggio.com. That's spelled JOHNRIGGIO.com. And there you will find out a description of my work. It shows a portfolio, pictures of the different job types. And I also have my contact information there. It shows my business address. From there, you can contact me and we can discuss your project. First, we will make an initial consultation. And then from there, we will then go over designing your project and then constructing your project. So I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.